to Article 14. This is another article by petition. And Article 14 is a long article, but in essence, this is a tends to the bylaw to ban the use of Styrofoam for disposable food and beverage containers by food establishments in the town of Shrewsbury. And this article is brought forward by, sir, if I get your name wrong. Ramesh Razdan?
That's correct.
All right.
Got it right.
Okay.
Good start.
Floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, I think we need to get this.
Okay.
I'm trying to get it up for you. Yeah.
Okay.
So the clicker's not going to work, but you can use the enter button.
Okay, then I'll stand up there.
Thank
These
you.
kids are going to speak. All right, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Ramesh Razdan. I've been in Massachusetts for 18 years and in Shrewsbury for 12 plus years. And my daughter recently graduated from Shrewsbury School Systems, and thanks to the Shrewsbury School System, she's actually in Cornell and as a junior year. I'm here as a concerned resident as well as a parent to discuss a very important topic of Styrofoam. And I think I want to give the credit to the young men here. They actually, my son and these kids did a research 3-4 months ago and shared with me the catastrophic impacts the Styrofoam has on our environment and our health. And since then, we have been on the journey to share the story with a number of communities. As part of that, we want to share with you the journey of Styrofoam. What are the effects? What are the causes? What can it have in a longer term impact? And I want to give these young men kudos for doing that and share the story with you. We will be glad to answer questions at the end. But again, thanks to these kids, they have done a lot of research. And let's give them time to walk the story, and I will be the clicker on the slide.
If you gentlemen could just introduce yourselves, it would be
Yeah,
appreciated.
So I'm Anish.
I'm Anirudh.
I'm Siddhant,
And I'm Raul Rosden.
and we're all juniors at Shrewsbury High School.
So what we first need to understand is what's the big problem with having styrofoam in our town?
The issue is that we're feeding our next generation, namely our generation, styrofoam. And while sometimes we don't realize what the harms of styrofoam are, when we take a deeper look in, there's a lot of problems that we just don't recognize on a day-to-day basis. And as a result, when we're feeding children in our school system styrofoam, at restaurants styrofoam, we don't recognize what the problem could be, but down the line, these issues will materialize and cause major health risks that we want to avoid by passing today's bylaw.
So here we can see all of these pictures were taken on just one day, and they show all the littering of styrofoam that we see in our environment. And here you can see at Shrewsbury High School all the styrofoam littered throughout our environment, which leads to all of these harms. It's like animals consume the styrofoam, and the harmful chemicals in the styrofoam eventually lead to their death. And here you can see Dean Park also, with all the waterways in Dean Park clogged up with the styrofoam. And we really need to prevent this at all costs.
So one of the major downsides of using styrofoam is that it'll be with us till from 500 to 1,000 years from now because it's non-biodegradable. And an astounding fact is that 80% of styrofoam ends up in landfills. So all the styrofoam that is accumulated up till date is still in the landfills, and we are continuing to add on to that, so we will be continuing to build up the volume of styrofoam in our landfills.
And crucially, the remaining 20% of that styrofoam ends up in our waterways, in our seas and oceans where the fish and birds are left to consume all that styrofoam. They get poisoned by the toxins in that styrofoam and they end up dying, which is like really, really bad for our environment and our biodiversity.
So overall, every single year, about 25 billion cups of styrofoam are thrown out. During just the 15 minutes of this presentation, about 50,000 cups on average would have been thrown out. Now, we looked at estimates of other towns of similar sizes with similar numbers of students in their public school systems, and we found that a reasonable estimate would be about 800,000 trays of styrofoam used over an entire year by those school systems. And by extension, the Shrewsbury Public Schools would use about 800,000 trays of styrofoam each year as well. And that's a lot of trays that have a lot of potential consequences.
But now let's talk about the proposal that Shrewsbury has brought up for dealing with this styrofoam. So Shrewsbury's decided that they want to incinerate styrofoam. However, there's many issues with this proposal. Namely that when styrofoam is incinerated, it leads to a lot of dioxins being released into the atmosphere. And this is a major problem because these dioxins are carcinogenic, which means that they lead to various diseases such as cancers and leukemia, affecting ourselves, our children. We need to stop this at all costs. And additionally, styrofoam contains the known carcinogen styrene, which it's also a major problem because when we microwave our styrofoam, the styrene in the styrofoam leaches into our foods, which causes this carcinogen to go into our bodies, which is why we need to be really limiting our styrofoam use and really preventing it.
So one of the major things that people don't look into is that all the background costs of incinerating the styrofoam. So though styrofoam may be a relatively cheap material, the money used to actually incinerate and get the resources to incinerate all add up to a substantial amount of money.
And so what's really important to recognize is that both the manufacturing and the incineration of the styrofoam requires non-renewable resources such as coal, right? And the reason that those things are really bad is because they let off carbon dioxide and other harmful gases into our environment that not only contributes to rising temperatures but also climate change, which is really bad for not only us but the future generations that we have.
And even if you're not considering your pocketbooks, children, or the environment, styrofoam kills a lot of animals as well. And it kills animals on land and sea by methods such as suffocation, choking, intestinal blockages, and entanglement. And we found that on average, about 2 million birds on land and sea annually are affected in some way by styrofoam, many of which die because of eating styrofoam.
So now let's think about what the solution is. The solution is to make Shrewsbury a styrofoam-free town so that we avoid all these environmental and health impacts. And here you can see throughout the United States, various towns have already taken the initiative to ban styrofoam in their communities. And this includes major cities such as Washington, D.C., San Francisco, and New York City. They've all decided to take the initiative because they know the harms and they know how important it is to move away from the styrofoam.
Excuse me, can you just go back 1 second? Can you just explain the colors to us and what they stand for?
Oh, okay, so the light blue have a couple of cities that have already banned styrofoam, and the dark blue are ones that are considering to.
As opposed to purple? What's purple?
Those are the states that haven't
done anything yet.
Right. But many of the major cities have already, such as New York City and Washington, D.C., have already completely banned styrofoam in their cities.
That means they have not taken any action.
So
There's 3 colors. There's some confusion as to what's blue and what may be purple.
So
Right.
the light blue is the turquoise kind of color. That's the one with the ones that have major cities that have already banned it. The color that's populating, for example, Iowa and Pennsylvania. Iowa and North Carolina and all those. That's the one that doesn't have any cities or towns. And the dark blue, purplish kind of one, that's Illinois and Pennsylvania. That's the one that has major cities that are considering or are in the process of moving over.
So, similar to the plastic bag ban that we have taken since last year, what we want to do is we are building up a movement such as the plastic bag ban, and now the state is considering to ban plastic bags. But what we are doing, and what 27 other towns have already done, is ban polystyrene in their respective towns. So what we would be doing is we're building a movement towards our end result, which would be having a statewide polystyrene-free state, which is known as HD 3015.
And so we've already seen 27 towns in Massachusetts alone move on to ban styrofoam. So we believe if Cambridge can do it, if Natick can do it, and even if Lee can do it, we should be able. We should take the next step into making Shrewsbury a styrofoam-free town.
Cambridge bans everything.
So And it's important to note that there are a lot of alternatives that are available to styrofoam for a number of different products. For example, we can use recycled paper products, conventional or new paper products, compostable or biodegradable products, or even types of plastics, which are all significantly better than styrofoam and don't have the ecological or health risks that styrofoam has.
So let's talk about what the result of a styrofoam ban would be. So there's a very low economic impact, which we'll detail in a few minutes. And we'll see our town be much cleaner, free of all this littering and environmental harms to our animals. And we'll be free of this carcinogenic risk, which leads to our healthier community.
So, as Anish had mentioned earlier regarding the several major cities such as New York City and San Francisco and all those, and Washington D.C. who have already banned, we see over here in New York City and the 5 other largest urban school districts in the U.S., which accumulated up to $500 million of styrene foam trays to be banned. But in the pictures, we see that in the first picture, we see New York City and how it was before the polystyrene bans, filled with litter of polystyrene trays. But in the second picture, we could clearly see the cleaner and better alternative of paper trays.
We've also seen many major corporations across the nation move towards a styrofoam-free environment. For example, Dunkin' Donuts has decided that they will be moving away from styrofoam by the year 2020, which lines up with our proposal for this bylaw. Most importantly, McDonald's and Chipotle are proceeding to be styrofoam-free in the future, and we believe that if these big companies can do it, that even the small companies in Shrewsbury should be able to.
Here, a chart by Clean Water Action finds that over a major picture, when you look at a number of different potential alternatives and a number of different products that can have the styrofoam or alternative methods, they find that on average, there's only about a 1 cent difference between the price of an average cup that is made of styrofoam or an average tray or other product versus an alternative product of a different non-styrene type material that is very similar. So here's the bylaw that we have proposed. Specifically, the important parts to look at are sections 2 and 3, which first define the styrofoam ban, and they explain that the styrofoam that's actually going to be banned under this bylaw is the ones used by restaurants and public facilities to deliver and serve food, and in quote-unquote disposable food service containers. And so that means it does not apply to unheated, uncooked food like meat and fish from grocery stores, and it only focuses on restaurants and our school systems. And the other important part of the bylaw is section 4, which talks about deferments. So basically it says that if a business demonstrates a undue hardship to the Department of Health, they have the ability to pursue a year-long deferment from the styrofoam ban. And that year-long deferment is renewable. So if a company really needs styrofoam for potentially many years, it can continue applying for these deferments and make sure that they can still continue to use styrofoam. But the fact is, most businesses aren't going to need this deferment, and it's only a last-case scenario for those businesses that have to either take some time to switch or don't really have another alternative.
And here, this details what Arnie was just talking about with what is actually going to be banned with this bylaw, and it only includes the pictures shown. And now let's talk about how this styrofoam ban is going to affect our Shrewsbury businesses. So the town graciously gave us a list of all 40 businesses in Shrewsbury that would potentially be affected by the ban. And we called all 40 of these affected businesses, which mainly includes restaurants and grocery stores that do sell styrofoam. And 29 of them graciously responded to us. And out of these, the vast majority of these businesses said that they are in complete support of a styrofoam ban and that it would not harm their business in any way. And the vast minority of these businesses, these 4, have still been able to, in other towns, in these other 27 towns in Massachusetts that we described, similar businesses to these, such as KFC, have successfully been able to switch over to the alternatives. Like in Natick, we see that KFC is able to switch from styrofoam to paper pretty easily, and we contacted this Natick KFC, and they said that they're completely happy with the switch. So overall, our Shrewsbury businesses will not be largely affected by the styrofoam ban. And if worst case scenario, there is a major cost difference for them, they can still apply for a deferment.
Yeah. So we found basically only one company that would really have no other alternative, which was a cake company which said that they required it for the inside of like a display cake. So we thought that since they reuse that styrofoam, since they're not actually serving it, if it does fall under the bylaw, we would be able to give them a deferment. But most of the other companies that used it either said they used very little of it and were able to switch, or didn't use it at all. And there were only very few companies, and the main one was just KFC, which in other cities has already switched away. So we think that it shouldn't be a hardship for this KFC.
So, as Anirudh had already mentioned, using the estimate of 800,000 trays per year, we would be looking at $32,000 per year spent on styrofoam trays, and which accumulates to 4 cents per tray. Looking at our alternatives, we have seen that from New York City, it was 5 cents to Amherst, which used an estimate of 9 cents per tray, and these all and 5 cents and 9 cents distribution between trays. Also, the cost of alternative solutions is continuing to drop because, especially by 2020, because as demand continues to increase, meaning like as more and more towns continue to follow this movement, the expected price of polystyrene of alternatives are expected to drop. And in addition, we contacted the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, and they had the possibility of granting us a grant of an unknown amount. However, we would first have to be able to pass this bylaw.
And one thing to remember there is that if there is a, let's say, 1 cent increase going from the styrofoam trays to the alternatives, the biodegradable alternatives, you have to remember that the environmental and health benefits far outweigh like a small 1 cent increase per tray.
Right. So overall, what we believe is that the cost will be minimal for businesses and the school system overall due to when you factor in the hidden costs that Rahul talked about getting rid of this styrofoam, and you consider the costs of the new alternative being really marginal. But overall, like Siddhant mentioned, we think that at the end of the day, the most important thing is the health of our people in Shrewsbury itself, and we believe that getting rid of styrofoam is a big step towards protecting those people.
I guess in closing, first and foremost, want to thank these kids because they have done a lot of work. As you can see, they have done a lot of research. And our goal is to make Shrewsbury styrofoam-free by 2020. This is in line with Dunkin' Donuts. There's no magic behind. We also want to give businesses time to adapt for next 18 months. And if you look at 27 towns with Massachusetts and the movement across, it is going to accelerate. It's definitely accelerating this year. At least this time around is I would say the bylaws get passed. There are a lot of towns that are actually considering this. I think the prices continue to drop. We believe there will be marginal impact, if any, because you have to look at the total cost of what it is. There will be marginal impact. Shrewsbury has been a role model. I came to Shrewsbury from Westboro because of the awesome community and amazing school system. I believe we want more of us, me to come here. And if we don't show that we care for the environment, we care for our health, I think there will be other impact. We want to be a happier and healthier community, and that's what we want to drive towards. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to say, I just have one comment before we get to questions. I'm very impressed with this presentation, the amount of time and research you put into it. We've had several petition articles come before. This is the most thorough and complete one that I have seen, and I'd also like to comment that Anirudh Iyer once played baseball for me when he was 10 years old. I find it hard to believe that this is the same young man who I think said 3 words to me all year when he was 10 years old. He's now a star of the Shrewsbury debate team. So I just wanted to get that out there. Thank you, Anirudh. It's good to see you. Questions from the committee? Donna.
I just want to say congratulations and thank you. I think we should have done this long before the plastic bags. And if you ever try to carry those styrofoam trays with soda or anything on it, I always fear that I'm going to drop it. And you probably don't know this, but the other trays were so much better because you could use them for sliding. And it totally ruined sliding. But seriously, I wish you would be even more strict with it and include it with the meats and everything else. I don't think you should be so kind. I think you should just wipe it out. Congratulations and thank you for doing this.
Gene?
I just wanted to ask one thing. You said you had contacted the merchants by phone?
Yeah, that's
I think that is a bad thing to do. I think you've done a great job here. I think you should go and visit them.
right.
Because we did have a lot of pushback on the plastic bags where we didn't contact a lot of the people directly, the people that were in charge of those facilities. You know, the manager of the store said, oh yeah, I think that's okay. But when it actually happened, it was a different story. So I think it would be, we have gone this far, I think you ought to spend a little time and actually visit the merchants, because you said you had 27 that
29,
said,
yeah, 20,
29 that said yes.
Yeah, 20.
I think just a follow-up would be a good thing.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
all.
Well, one thing we did, these kids have done is, we looked at all the 27 towns. We talked to them. Has there been any businesses that have been impacted? Because we also want Shrewsbury to be a wealthy town, right? We don't want businesses to move away. The general indication is there has not been a business movement. There's not been any negative impact, but we're still validating that.
Hannah?
Excellent presentation. I see a lot of presentations, and this is by far one of the best that I've seen. So congratulations for that. To follow up on what Mr. Budenhagen was saying, I think it would be helpful if you actually had something where if you have discussed it with the businesses, where they are indicating in a way in which you can share with people that they have understood the business implication and that they are on board with it, whether it's a letter that you draft and you ask them to sign on to it. But I think that it's important to have something that shows that you have gone and done this work and that they understand the implication to it and they are on board
we
with
can
it.
certainly get signatures from the managers or the leaders of these businesses.
Specifically, with the calls that we did, we do recognize we probably should be going to visit a lot of them. And we only did these calls recently because we only got the list about a week and a half ago. But what we did, a lot of these calls weren't specifically about whether or not they would support it, but whether or not they use Styrofoam. And so of those 29 that responded, there were 4 that said they use a lot of it. There were about 2 or 3 that said they use very minimal amounts, and they said they were okay. So we were looking to try and follow up with them specifically. But a lot of them also said that they don't use Styrofoam at all. So while we will certainly in the future try to go and contact them as well, as many of them did offer endorsements and support that we weren't able to follow up on in time for this, we do think that just the fact that they don't use it suggests that they'd probably be in support. So we think that we're at least fairly confident that they should be kind of affirming what they've already told us.
I think, a call is a good first step, but I think actually taking them in a copy of this and indicating that that's what you're trying to do and having them indicate what the business impact is and whether or not they're supportive of it, because when you do go before a town meeting, I think people will truly want to understand that businesses had that chance to understand.
That makes sense.
Just the one thing is that a lot of these big chains, for example, like Domino's, we also asked them, they said they were in the support of the ban, and we asked them for a sponsorship through an email. And they're not really on board to sign anything because they need official confirmation from their head office, which is wherever in their corporate department. So a lot of those big chains aren't ready to put anything down on paper, but we'll definitely look towards the more local businesses that would be okay to sign down with us.
Chris?
Gentlemen, you did an outstanding job, and your presentation skills are great. Your eye contact, it was very, very good. I was very impressed. A couple of points. Who drafted the legalese? Who drafted
bylaw?
this? The bylaw.
So we based it off of, I'm not sure exactly.
Amherst.
We
We
based
based
it
it
We
off
based off of Amherst, the bylaw that they passed. So it's very similar. We changed up some of the words to more apply to Shrewsbury. But we saw with them, they were most successful in passing one that focused only on restaurants and the school system, because they were able to pass that and actually prevent the health harms there.
They also have experience banning things.
Through the leaders.
Okay, another point. So you said in your slide presentation, you said that 11 of the 41 businesses that you contacted did not respond, right? So that's almost a 25% non-response rate, right?
Yeah.
So are you going to?
No,
Yeah,
we were going to follow
They
up with
weren't
them
able
and
to
then also
respond
go.
in the couple times that we called them, especially because times didn't work out.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the people that the manager wasn't present, and some of the employees weren't sure when the manager might show up. So we didn't know when to call. We're going to continue calling those ones because
And we're going to
wanna make
continue
sure
to
that-
go. to
We'll
them.
go into
we'll
these.
go
And
to
we'll
them.
go and
Restaurants.
we'll also go and find as many and meet with as many of them as we can.
Okay, and then who enforces this? The Board of Health enforces this?
Yes,
And the
Board
Board
of
of Health, and, Mr. Manager, is the Board of Health on board with managing and maintaining the, fines? So are they aware of this petition?
They are aware of it. We've sent it out. We would be able to incorporate that both into the licensing process with the Board of Selectmen if necessary, and when we do annual food inspections, things like that. It would mostly be a complaint-driven
Yeah, okay,
operation.
all right.
Has the board taken a position on this article? Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Judy?
I think it bears repeating that this was a great presentation, particularly the research that you guys did. I guess the question I kind of have is, we've talked about the schools, and I'm not really familiar with how Styrofoam is used in the schools. That's part one, if you could address that. And part two was, have you talked with the school administration about the costs and what types of things that they could use in place of Styrofoam, how they might do that?
Right. So the way that the school currently uses Styrofoam is for lunches. Every student, when they buy lunch, they get a Styrofoam tray to eat their food on.
Really? Okay.
So that's where the 800,000 trays per year comes from.
Okay.
And also, so a couple of years ago, a fellow student had also contacted the administration because they were doing a project regarding polystyrene, and they contacted Mr. Bazudlo and Mr. Nevada, and they were in favor of. So administration is in support for Shrewsbury High School.
And the student advisory committee as well, for example, is in full support of
Like
Styrofoam.
the members of
The members of the
SAC
team,
were in support.
So I think, Judy, there are two answers. There's a short-term answer, there's a long-term. Most towns actually have gone to a compostable or recyclable plates. I don't know whether Shrewsbury is there or that's a conversation to be had. I think we're saying is you may go to at least compostable. But if you look at most of the other towns, which are maybe richer, I guess, they have gone to compostable.
Reusable.
Reusable, I should say, reusable. They have gone to reusable, like Andover. The 27 towns, even Framingham, even Auburn has gone to reusable. They have not banned Styrofoam, but they are going to reusable. So I think a lot of towns, even if they have not banned, they have actually gone to reusable automatically.
Yeah.
Because it is bad because you're consuming Styrofoam as part of your food, which is
Right.
not good.
Right.
So I think we have some work to do in the school system, and I think town manager is asking, getting us the actual details, because we use, so far it's hypothetical data that we used. We are waiting for school district to respond to us, how many trays they're using, what are the appropriate costs that we need to take account for.
Yeah. We've emailed them within in the past week, but we haven't gotten a response yet
Yeah,
on
okay.
exactly the
They're working on
details.
it.
They're working on it. They haven't gotten a full response yet to us on the specifics on the details. But we thought that if we looked at like comparable towns and what they've done with their compostable options, such as the one that we used that was 9 cents, as well as Amherst, I believe, yeah, and the ones that had like 5 cents, we found like a range that would be very reasonable for us to be able to switch to. So then we were just calculating what the potential cost change would be based off those.
And if you look at the towns that have actually done that, their cost has actually dropped over the years. Framingham is a good example. We actually done that. Their cost has dropped. There's an initial bump cost, but over a period of time, the cost actually drops because the reusable actually drives that. But that is something that I think you need dishwashers and all that. I think that's a
Yeah.
bigger thing for town to consider. But
Storage,
if you look at
Compost.
reusable and things, they have actually done that, and we have data to share that it can be done.
And so we looked at the 27 other towns, and the 9 cents was the most expensive possible amount that we found for a biodegradable tray. But
And that was by Amherst.
other towns in Massachusetts have gotten it much lower than this 9 cent value.
And New York
So
City has gone into 5 cents.
Yeah.
But
and Montgomery,
Maryland
had
gone
a
into like
4.2.
4.2 cents. So it's really not that big of a monetary cost for our schools.
Well, I'm definitely in support of this, and I'm hoping if by chance this doesn't pass, I would like to see the schools move away from Styrofoam, because I think that that's really not what we should be doing. It sort of flies in the face of, I think, where we should be going. But I certainly am 100% in support of this.
Yeah.
Just to follow up on the school question, have you spoken to St. John's and Alhambra and the other schools as well?
We have
No,
not
I haven't.
spoken
We
to them
will,
yet.
And we'll make sure to contact them too, and try to get the information on their numbers as well.
Mark?
Thank you. Just a minor typo for the next round to get fixed. The last definition under section 3 has just a glitch in it. I don't know if that was from the transcription to us or in the original draft, but you'll see it. It's the last definition in section 3. If you should just clear that out.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Anything from the public?